When we consider this class, it will be a big help if you have a good understanding of the exposure triangle, understanding the balance between your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. And the reason for that is because we are going to be dealing with a lot of low light when we actually start taking photos in golden hour. When the sun is coming up early in the morning, or especially when it's starting to set late in the afternoon, you're going to have to be able to work with low light and to try and balance out those three factors: your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. So it'll be good if you have an understanding of that, especially doing this class. Now, if we think of our composition that we're going to be looking at in golden hour, now we consider again what is the objective of good composition. And good composition, our first objective is we want to draw our viewer into the image. Okay. Then our second point is in composition, we want to create interesting points of perspective or different intersection points. We want to do that also. Then obviously, third of all, we want to try and find elements in our composition that is going to draw attention to or emphasize our subject or our object that we are placing in this composition. So that's just to recap what is the objective of good composition. Now, if we think of composition, there are quite a few complicated rules of composition that are being used in photography. But because we are dealing with a very limited opportunity or time frame in golden hour, remember our sun is going to either be rising very quickly or it's going to be setting relatively quickly. So the time frame is very short, which means trying to utilize these complicated composition rules can become quite challenging and time consuming, which obviously time is not going to really be something on your hands at this stage. It's going to be probably crunch time. Now, so for this class, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is a relatively simple rule of composition, but it also can create some fantastic opportunity to be able to put elements together in perfect balance or in perfect harmony within our image. So if we have a look at the rule of thirds, what's nice about the rule of thirds is that basically it's utilizing or exploiting the human's eye natural tendency to gravitate around an image, to view what's there, but to come back and still rest on the actual focal point. In this case, it's going to be our subject. But the rule of thirds does also something else for us, in the fact that it allows us to, or rather it encourages us to be more wary of our subject placement in our image. And then another point there is that it allows us to place objects of interest on the different lines or the intersecting points on our grid line. So why we're talking about a grid line is if you go in on your camera and you look at live view mode, if you switch it onto live view mode and you've got your LCD screen in front of you on, for those who are not familiar with the rule of thirds, you can actually set your camera in the menu to grid display or grid view, and you'll have a choice there on which grid you want to use. So choose the rule of thirds grid there and get that on your screen, and that will actually assist you quite tremendously when you are looking at subject placement. Now, if we look at subject placement, on these lines that you're going to see that are provided through the rule of thirds, the whole idea of the rule of thirds is to bring balance into our image. So we're going to have vertical lines and we're going to have horizontal lines. Okay? And you'll see that your screen is actually divided up into three different sections, vertical and horizontal. Now, the nice thing about the rule of thirds is, like we mentioned to you, you're going to be able to take your camera, and when you look at your scenario, you can, in your mind, you can visualize how you're going to balance out your image. So you can see exactly your subject, where exactly you're going to place your subject on this grid line in order to bring some form of balance. Now, just a tip as a general rule of thumb, what we do, what is a good practice to do, is to basically place your subject on the opposite side to which they are looking in. So if they're looking to the right of the frame, we're going to be basically placing the subject on the left hand line, one of those lines on the left hand side. So that will basically prevent the idea that the subject is actually not just looking into nothing, but the subject is actually looking into the depth of the scenario. So if we now use those lines now, we can place any object, whether it is rocks or poles or anything like that. We can place them on these lines to bring in balance, but also we can use it to bring our attention focus to our subject. Now, with that being said, there is something now that we can really consider to add into our image or into our composition that's going to make it even much stronger. Now, we touched on now leading lines, taking our attention to the subject. So these elements we want to look at, like leading lines, symmetry, diagonal lines, and then also repetition. And now all of these different elements we use to put into a frame or into a composition. So once we have observed our scenario, we can look at it and we can identify what exactly are we going to use in that scenario, what elements can we use in that scenario that's basically going to complement our subject and add volume and interesting points to our composition. So the good thing to do in this case is look at your scenario, visualize and identify what is happening in your scenario. What can you use? What is powerful that can basically be used to draw attention to our subject, that we can also use to maximize, in this case, the beautiful golden colors in golden hour. Remember, that's what we actually want to accomplish here. So it could even be elements that are going to allow maybe light reflecting off, or maybe extra shadows, or like we say, that's going to draw attention to our subject. So let's just break that up a bit. If we have a look at our first element, leading lines, now we can see in the image that we have, in this image we have railings that is taking our attention to our subject. Okay? But now it's also doing something else. The railings are actually going past our subject and taking the viewer's attention towards the sunset, towards the beautiful golden colors that are in the background. And remember, this is what we want to capture in our composition. Then we have symmetry. Now we can see the symmetry basically, besides the fact that it acts as leading lines, it also does something else in our composition. It's creating balance. And this is also very important that we want to also create within our composition. The symmetry gives us depth. It's taking us to our subject. It's taking us further in our subject into the picture, to the background, again to the color. And then we find ourselves following our way, or the viewer finds his eyes coming back on the deck, which is repetition, towards the subject. So in these different elements, the attention always comes back to the subject. So this is actually what we want to capture. Now, the other thing here is diagonal lines. Now, diagonal lines can also be used to draw a person's or a viewer's attention into the subject, into the image, taking our attention to the subject, but it can also create shapes. In other words, interesting points or interesting things to have a look at, interesting perspectives. So it is good to be able to look into your scenario and to identify all of these elements. Now, in the beginning, it might take you a little while to be able to do this, but with practice, it will allow you to have a look at your scenario, identify all your elements, realize what you're going to use, what are your strong factors, what are your not strong factors, and include that into your composition. Now, once we've done all of this and we're happy with this, we're happy with what it's doing in our image, it's drawing our attention to our image, we're maximizing the golden colors and all the golden hues, you're happy about that? Take the click and take the photo. So what is very clear in what we've just discussed now is the very fact that our composition that we're using, the elements that we're using in our composition to create it, is not detracting attention away from our subject. It's actually complementing our subject. These elements are complementing the golden hour, and this is really what we want to achieve, in this case, in composition. And in this way, composition in golden hour is different than in other parts of the day. Now, that being said, now a lot of this is going to now depend on your lighting at that particular moment. How low is the sun? How strong is your light at that particular moment? Because that is going to basically determine how you're going to go about being creative and utilizing all this information that's in front of you. Remember, we want to create magic in golden hour. So, keeping in mind that the rule of thirds is a rule of composition, but we want to keep in mind that compositional rules or guidelines is exactly what they are, the guidelines. They are not fixed laws. So every now and then, as photographers, as artists, we want to expand our fields, we want to expand our style. So as artists, we will bend the rules a bit. We will combine different factors together in order to create or to capture just the right composition or just the right effect that we want to get within this beautiful golden hour. So experiment with these things. Remember, you want to create your style. That's what you want to do. So take these elements, experiment with them, make them work for you, and grow as an artist. Now, throughout the class, we have been touching on camera settings, what kind of camera settings we're going to be using, especially that lesson we had in getting creative. Our next lesson, camera settings, we're going to have a look at some of these camera settings in just a bit more detail. I'll see you there.